partner from way back. This is a part 2. We're kind of going to the second phase of Sons of Intellect Days, which was our group that we had back in the late 90s. Also, the conversation went so well that I decided to reach out to one of the guys that was at one of the situations that we talk about in this podcast, a guy by the name of Jeff Adams. I got him on the phone at the end of this podcast to check that out. And I also put one of the songs from the Sons of Intellect album on the end of this podcast. If you would like to get the whole thing, please become a patron at patreon.com/kj52. There is a ton of unreleased music there. Or if you ever need feedback on your music, I do demo reviews and things like that. Also, if you are listening to this, please make sure you rate, subscribe in iTunes. It helps me move up the charts. And yeah, love you guys. Oh yeah, and support my Kickstarter for my movie. Anyway, that's it. Thank you guys. Love y'all. Deuces. What's up, everybody? kj52 here, in the midst of getting my hair cut with none other than Golden Child, a.k.a. Jack Marlowe. This is episode number 8, part 2 of the kj52 Sons of Intellect era days. You're going to hear buzzing in the background. It's not a bunch of bees. It's my man shaping me up.
Clippers.
It's clipping. So, I don't know, where should we pick up, bro? Where should we pick up from? We were talking about how the album, right before we did the album.
Yeah, right before I don't even think we touched on the single. I think we had stopped it at the T-Bone Show, and then Southeastern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know, before I was solo, but as we talked about in the first episode, this 13-year-old kid walked up to me in the middle of a parking lot, was come off the head like nobody I'd ever seen before. And so I kind of started picking him up and taking him out as like a hype man. So it was, I don't know what you call it. It was King J. Mac and the Golden Child.
I don't know.
Something like that. But I went off to Bible college, and that's where I formed Sons of Intellect with a guy in Bible college, really just as a name to for our student ministry. There was nothing spiritual about it. I made it up in chapel, trying not to pass out. Anyway, came back from that. I started working at this church, Cornerstone Church, and Golden Child, a.k.a. Jack, had been kind of really growing artistically, I felt like. And did you get a drum machine?
You had talked about that in the last interview. I had.
You did get a drum machine?
I had a drum machine and a sampler, and we had touched on making beats, and then we had talked about your transition to kj52. And
right, that's right. That's right. Okay. So he gets this little drum machine and it was like a 3-second sampler.
30 seconds on mono, 15 on stereo. Whoop, whoop.
That's it's funny. It's funny when you think about when you work with limited equipment, how it really forces you to be that much more creative. You know what I mean? I think that's one of the beauties of hip hop is that, you look at the culture itself as, when young black and Hispanic kids had nothing to make music on, they said, well, we'll just take the break beats and we'll make music. And when they had no, musical training, they figured out how to put talking over beats, you know what I mean? And when B-boys had no place to dance, they said, we'll bust out the cardboard and we'll make that our dance floor. And when guys had no place to do their art, they said, well, we'll turn these spray cans into paintbrushes. I think that's sort of the beauty of hip hop. It's really the beauty of minority people in the sense of black and brown people who were handed nothing and made something out of nothing, if you think about that. But I digress. Anyway, I was just thinking about how you only had a 30-second sampler that, if I'm not mistaken, didn't it it wouldn't sync up with the drum machine?
The MIDI time code on it and the SMPTE codes were off, so the loop. The loop on it was not how like an Akai would work, or like a SP12 or what was the
MPC?
MPC, and there was another one. Was it
SP1200?
SP1200, yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Technique 12. Yeah, SP1200. The looping on that was almost impeccable. The looping on this sampler was not. It was like a Roland. I don't remember the number of it, but the looping just wasn't there. So I remember when we started making beats,
you'd have to play it.
We'd have to press the loop pad. The entire beat.
The entire beat.
And
so
if you wanted breakdowns, you had to
You did not press it.
Not pressing yet.
Well, so let me explain that in layman's terms so people don't understand like tech speak. So when you sample something, be it a sound or whatever, you have to make it a perfect loop so it repeats correctly. If it's not looped properly, then it will come back in off beat and then it will throw your whole song off. So what he's talking about is the fact that this thing would not sample it correctly.
It would sample correctly. It wouldn't loop correctly.
It wouldn't loop
Make
correctly.
Your chop at a certain point.
Yeah.
It would always be a millisecond off at the loop point, which would make the loop go off beat within 4 to 8 bars.
So essentially, what you'd had to do is keep pressing the button, almost like someone who would play an instrument. You'd have to keep by hand pressing the loop over and over and over and over throughout the whole song. So you got to keep doing this over and over.
Yeah.
Until your fingers hurt. And that's pretty much how we made the first album.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know, if you pledge to the new documentary, you will get this record, the Insightful Comprehensions record. And I always kind of look back and go, man, it's amazing that a 16-year-old kid, were you 16, 15?
Yeah, I was 16 at that point.
A 16-year-old kid had the wherewithal to essentially find the loops, the samples, to find the tracks, to program the drums. I mean, that's pretty, I don't know, what would you say? That's pretty ahead of your time.
Yeah, I mean, you ask me now and I go back and listen to those beats, they were pretty basic. It was drums, bass line, and samples, but at the time, yeah, we did what we did. It was cool.
So this all brings us to the point where the groundwork had been kind of laid to start working on the first project, and I had been already going to the studio locally in Fort Myers for a while, and they would give me sort of free sessions if I worked with their students, allow their students to kind of work on the songs, and so that kind of became like an impetus for us to like try out new tracks and try out new songs and stuff like that, and from that point on we actually, instead of making an album first, we decided to make a single, correct?
Yeah.
Which eventually became the most popular song on the record, which is a song called Worldwide.
It's funny you say that, because here's the crazy thing about Worldwide. When I made that beat, I didn't have anything but my drum machine. I didn't have a sampler. And I actually used a 15-second looper on a DJ mixer. But the problem with that was you couldn't trim. So I had to try to catch the sample the best I could. And the sample was off when we first wrote the song. And then when we went to Unity Gain, Anthony had a real sampler, and I brought in the original sample, and we found the trim points and looped it on his sampler, and then I put the drums behind it with the drum machine, and then after the single was when we had enough money to actually buy a sampler.
Yeah.
I vividly remember that.
So what happened basically was that we took the money that we made from those singles that we pressed up and put that towards the album.
Yep.
And I think kind of too around that time, I mean, you're talking mid to late 90s. Christian hip-hop was still very much a new thing in the sense of acceptance in the church and, like, as far as, not even talking about the mainstream side of things, because in the mainstream it was kind of a virtual unknown, in my opinion. But I think one thing to just really talk about on this time around is just, like, how I felt like in a lot of ways we were beating down new paths as far as going into mainstream clubs and opening up for groups that I grew up listening to. Within a couple years I was the opening act.
Yeah.
And the first one of all things would be the fact that we opened up for Wu-Tang Clan.
Yeah.
In 90, what year was that? 96? 98? No, it wasn't 98. It was definitely it was definitely. In fact, I was listed as King J Mac on that flyer.
That's
because
right.
we weren't even Sons of Intellect yet.
Yeah, so it was 95, 96.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So, like, for any show to come to Fort Myers, like Southwest Florida, was like one kind of mind blowing because nothing came through this area. I mean, stuff would come to Tampa, stuff would come to Orlando, stuff would come to Miami, but forget something to come to Fort Myers of all places, much less Wu-Tang, which
at the time was, they were everything.
Yeah, and that was definitely your favorite group.
Oh yeah.
And I'll never forget this show because it was just the absolute train wreck of a nightmare. I actually almost got beat down pretty severely you ended up getting a Heineken offered to you by one of the by one of the Wu-Tang members.
Yeah.
What else happened? The Wu-Tang, they never performed. One of the guys got up there. They booed him off the stage, which I was like, that sums up our town. You bring in an artist, and then you boo him off the stage.
Yeah.
And then there was a very young, unknown Mystical.
Yep. Mystical
He opened up. He opened up.
DJ Uncle Luke.
Uncle Al.
Was it Uncle Al?
Uncle Al.
Luke?
No. Luke is Two Live Crew. DJ Uncle Al.
Oh, okay.
And then JT Money.
Too many uncles.
Too many uncles. But do you remember that night well?
I do remember that night very well.
So you're a little 16-year-old. Were you 16?
Yeah,
15?
Well, if it was 96, I was 15.
That sounds about right. So
Yeah.
basically, I got with the promoter. He put me on the flyer. He spelled my name wrong. I'll never forget this. I got to find that flyer. I'm going to put it up on the podcast if I find it. Instead of being King J Mac on the flyer, I was Kim G Mech.
Yeah.
I was Kim G. I was an Asian man apparently. Kim G. But anyway,
They're trying to keep it that Wu-Tang theme.
right. So I remember we got to the show. I got there super early for sound check, and the sound wasn't even there. Like the sound system hadn't even been set up.
Yep.
People were outside ready to come in, and they were still setting up the sound system.
Yep, I remember that.
And so we were just hanging out, and it was just such a weird vibe. It was in the Armory, which was kind of like this big empty building,
Yep.
and I felt like
Wonderful acoustics.
it just felt like such chaos that show. Like there was no backstage. There was just like a little spot that they had blocked off. So everybody was irritated to begin with because one, they had never, the show didn't start on time. Then the opening acts just kept going longer and longer and longer. I remember we went on. I think we only did one song. I think we were the exact first group, and I don't think it was like a bad reception, but it wasn't a great reception either. It was just kind of like, all right, but they just kind of tolerated us. Would you say we were probably the only white guys in the whole place?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I think people don't understand how segregated hip hop was at one point, especially in the South. Like to be two white guys doing Christian rap of all things in those environments is like you stuck out like nobody's business, and that was also
you stuck out like a white Christian rapper at a hip hop show.
Exactly. But I think also too, like it's funny because I think people also forget how, at the height of the '90s was the time when 5% Speak was super popular. And for those who don't know what 5%ers are, it was an offshoot from the Nation of Islam, which is an offshoot from Islam itself. But 5%ers basically believe that the black man is God, the white man is devil. And yeah, exactly. So that's literally the environment we were stepping into where...
And the crazy thing is Wu-Tang was like the spearhead in the mainstream of that. Like
right.
They were gods.
Like the literal guy that Jack ends up hanging out with, his actual rap name was You God.
Yep. Because, hey, he's a god.
So, just to kind of paint the picture a little bit better. So this kind of leads up to the moment when I almost caught a beatdown backstage. And I don't know, in hindsight, I don't know what possessed me to think that should have jumped in that cypher. And for those that don't know what a cypher is, I mean, when rappers would huddle up in a circle, they would spit rhymes at each other, and it was called a cypher, which actually really came from 5% Talk. Mm-hmm. And I remember just looking and seeing about 10 dreadlocked rap guys ciphering and rhyming, and we came from a pretty friendly environment where it was common to everybody that spits gets a chance to rhyme, and that's just that's the way MCs related to each other. So I think in my head I thought, oh, this shouldn't be any different.
Yeah.
So I never forget this because it really was a good picture of the way things were at that point. Is I jumped in and I started rapping, and I think within 10 seconds of me rhyming, it was like all 10 of those guys just turned on me.
Yep.
Were you there for that?
I was there for that. Yeah, I remember that.
Were you like I always thought you were like far off somewhere.
No, I was right. We stuck around each other the whole night because you didn't want me really going because I was 15.
Right.
You didn't really want me going anywhere because there was alcohol in the club. Not that I would drink, but it was not really a place for a 15-year-old.
Right.
It was a 21 and up show.
Right. Well, okay, so maybe you can paint the picture better than I can, because for me it happened so fast.
It was quick. But the thing was, I had the same thought of you. Like, this is the common language in hip hop. Like, okay, you may prejudge us, but once we come off the head, because I was actually gonna rap right after you, and then when I saw it go sour, I'm like, I guess I'm not rapping.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize you were that
I was
close
standing
by.
right there. Yeah, I was right. Well, I mean, you were in the cipher, but I was like right behind you to your left.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what do you remember of that? Of what happened?
It just, I don't think it was anything you really said. I genuinely think it was just your skin tone and the gall to actually step up in this cipher, because it was really a bunch of rappers that just kind of came there with the groups that were booked.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was like, so, it was probably some people that are cool with Wu-Tang or whoever else was there, and they're doing their cipher thing, and who the heck's this white guy trying to rap with us?
Right.
Yeah.
So what I remember clearly was, as fast as it happened, they had me all up against the wall.
Yeah.
And I remember my back was against the wall, and I couldn't go anywhere. And guys were within, a foot of my face, almost like scream rapping at me.
Yeah.
And
But
it was like, I've never had something go that south that glass. Yes, I have.
Well, the reason why I remember it so vividly is because we were about 3 feet away from the wall, and the doors to the stage were to the left.
Right.
So I remember because immediately when they started rushing, you pushed me out of the way.
I did?
Yes, you got me right out of the way. And I remember the whole time you had your hand on my arm, like don't go nowhere, almost like a big brother type thing. And I'll never forget it because I'm watching these guys, and the whole time you're staring them down and they're rapping it, and you got your arm on me like, just stay right there. It's going to be all right. It was weird, dude.
See, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah.
That's funny that you, wow.
Yeah, I remember that very vividly.
So I remember just thinking, okay, I'm about to get hit. Like someone's either going to sock me in the face, or all five of these guys are going to start, they're going to get me on the ground, and it's going to go from just rapping. It's going to go from just rap stuff to like
Beef.
to actual physical confrontation. And I think the only thing I remember in my head just saying, don't instigate further, but also don't back down.
Yeah.
And I remember my back was against the wall, and obviously I couldn't go anywhere. And it's like that adrenaline kicks in, and your fight or flight comes on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget, as fast as it happened, was literally as fast as it was over.
Yeah.
And it was just like everybody just turned around and walked away.
Yep.
But I remember so clearly hearing over and over, yeah, we disrespected that devil. Over and over. That's the thing I kept hearing as they, and I just kind of sat there, and I remember kind of looking to my right, and there was just some guy sitting there, and he's like, "You need to go, bro."
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But we didn't leave, did we? I know we didn't
No, we
leave.
didn't leave because
I think we went to the back of the
when
room.
we went back inside, Polo was there.
Really?
Yeah, and we kicked it with Polo the rest of the show.
But I kind of remember vividly at that point going, I don't think I'm gonna hang backstage anymore.
Yeah.
And I remember we kind of went to the other side of the room where the bathrooms were.
Yeah.
And that was when Capadonna and You God, I remember they were like, they either went to the bathroom or one of them was there. And I remember asking, so somebody was up there rapping. I remember asking You God, like, what do you think of that group? And he just went thumbs down.
Yeah. Like that.
Where was that? Okay, so, but I remember you did disappear at one point, and then you came back and you're like, dude, I just freestyled with You God.
Yeah.
When did that happen? Because I don't remember.
That happened prior to the other cipher.
Okay.
Because he hadn't gone on yet.
Okay.
And he was just
Like,
back
how
there.
did that happen? Like,
Well,
how?
'cause him and Cap were rapping, so I just was like, yo, I was one of the openers, and I just spit a freestyle, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, it was a totally different vibe.
Wow.
Because here's the thing I found out with those guys. Like, they perpetuated that 5% stuff, but they
Right.
still realized they had fans
Right.
in every single
Right.
color and creed.
That's what I always thought was interesting. So many of the really hardcore 5%ers who you would think would just like want to shoot on sight when you were a white guy in hip hop weren't always like that. They could actually, like, if you could come on some commonality of just music,
Yeah, they'd listen to you.
they would there was a degree of like, yeah, I always was a little confused. But then again, they always left me confused because they would smoke weed constantly, but then they'd be like, no pork.
Yeah. One thing I found interesting is when you met Polo, he was like kind of toying with the idea of becoming a 5%er.
Really?
But he told me like prior to his death that our influence on him, he kept his Christianity. I mean, to the extent of what he did, but
Right.
it made him realize. I love that dude. I miss
Yeah.
Polo a lot. That's a whole nother thing.
Okay. Let's also clarify what he's talking about. There was a local guy at the time. His name was Polo, and he ran a magazine. And
Heard.
yeah, and he actually gave us a lot of really good looks. And so if you've watched any of the battle footage that I've been posting on my Instagram, that whole battle was actually while this guy was in the hospital. And I think we did it. Didn't they do the battle to raise money for him?
Yes, it was to raise money for his hospital bills.
For his hospital bills and his cancers and
Yeah.
stuff. So he was an interesting guy because he was kind of like a former church guy who then just got really into the hip hop scene, but always gave us a lot of really good looks, you know. And
He's from Brooklyn.
was he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I remember his brother used to come to First Assembly.
Yeah.
Something like that. But anyway, I digress. So that Wu-Tang show was sort of a hit or miss in a lot of ways, you know, because on one hand it was like we came, we saw, we didn't conquer, but we at least survived.
Yeah, the beef wasn't with the crowd; it was with the 5%ers backstage.
But the funny thing I noticed about the show was that, again, so the crowd keeps thinning out as the night progresses, you know, and by the time Wu-Tang was supposed to get up there, none of them got up there
except you, God.
except you, God,
Because they
and
didn't want to get on stage if it was whack.
right, and so the crowd, I think, at that point was pretty ticked, what was left of them. And I'll never forget this, and it kind of made me realize, like, anybody that thinks the secular market is, like, so much better,
It's not.
it's not. It's a hot mess. Because he gets up there, he's, like, telling the guy to play his tracks. The guy doesn't know how to run his tracks properly. Nothing's playing, so he starts to kick an a cappella.
Oh yes.
And so me as a MC and a lyricist, it was like, yo, I want to hear what this guy has to say. And immediately the boo birds came out.
Yep.
Like, and I just watched them boo the headliner right off the stage.
Yep.
And I never forget, I mean, he cussed the crowd out. He threw the mic down on the ground, and the show was done.
That was it.
That was it.
Yep.
And I thought, this is the most disappointing mainstream show I've ever been to.
Well, the reason, do you remember this? The main issue with the night was the flyer, the billing for the concert was
That's right.
ODB.
ODB, that's
and
right.
then he couldn't make it because he was arrested.
Right.
So they sent 4 Wu-Tang members in place of ODB.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought you said they didn't want to go play because they didn't like the way they were dressed.
No, they didn't want to go play because they thought it was whack. But
Got it.
they sent 4 members because at that time, 36 Chambers, the dirty version, Escape from Brooklyn Zoo, was like
Right.
at the top of the charts.
Right.
So they're like, well, man, we got the top of the chart. We had to send more members. So
Right.
for the same price as ODB, they got 4 Wu-Tang members, but it just didn't go very well.
And I think too, it helped to clarify. We're in like the deep South. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is Florida South, which is a completely different South. So like East Coast rap did not translate to Fort
think
Myers.
back then more
It
so
translated
than
to
now.
skater kids
Yeah.
and like mostly white suburban kids, but it's not like hood dudes were bumping.
Yeah.
They weren't bumping Wu-Tang like they would be bumping JT Money or Mystical.
Well, because, that was the thing. Even though Mystical wasn't the headliner,
Right.
the crowd loved it. Because
Yeah.
here I go. I mean,
Dum, dum, dum. Yeah, I go. He actually, it's funny too because out of all the people that played, he actually put on the best show. I remember watching him and going like, I don't even know anything except for Here I Go. But the guy
He
like,
actually shook your hand when you got off stage. I remember that.
did he?
Yeah.
See, I don't.
Because I think we were like one of the only openers, and he was standing there, and he gave you your props.
See that again? What you remember versus what I remember is like two completely
I was so
different.
wide-eyed then, man. Like, it was like...
I think I was just making sure. I was like, okay, I got to make sure Jack doesn't smoke weed or get beat up. That's the main 2 goals of my night, and then I'm the one who almost gets beat up.
Yeah.
But then I couldn't believe how fast the show was over.
Yeah,
Like
it was
just
crazy.
that fast, they booed him off the stage. They turned on the lights, and it was done.
Yep.
And I thought,
And the sheriff's department had to disperse everybody.
right, and because I mean, it was darn near ready. People were ready to riot in a lot of ways. And I remember thinking, like, who pays money to go to a show and boo the headliner? But then I was like, wait a minute, I don't think they really even like the headliner. Wu-Tang, and that's when I was like, man, we really got. That's when I started to think, because of like 2 white East Coast rapping Christian rap kids. I was like, we got a really uphill battle,
Yeah. Yeah.
But it wasn't discouraging enough to me to go, I just want to give up. And then, what was the next big like mainstream show we did? Was it Was it the Mobb Deep stuff, or was it the Beat Nuts in Miami?
I think all that stuff came after the Danceteria stuff. I thought.
You think so?
I thought DOS Effects and Rob Bass shows were before, because it was the same promoter for the Outkast and Lil Kim and Mobb Deep and all those shows.
No, that was a different promoter.
Was it a different promoter?
Yeah, because it was the Seminole Indian Reservation. That's who brought in Mobb Deep and all those shows.
That's what I was saying. All those shows were the same.
Yeah.
Promoter.
Right.
Where the Danceteria show was someone else.
Right.
I don't. And then the
It's a
NFL
blur.
show in Miami where we met Chino XL. That was crazy.
You know what?
We're just skipping around.
I know.
now.
It's all a blur. It's hard to know which is which. But it's funny. Somebody asked me the other day about Eminem. They're like, they were on this they were like, oh, you must have set out to copy him. You're a carbon copy.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I knew about him before you knew about him.
Yeah.
And
we met one of his DJs.
Was it his DJ?
Yeah, Cypher was Cypher a friend with his DJ?
No, we met AL from the Beat Nuts.
Yes, because that's how we did it though. Cypher was DJ Cypher Sounds was DJing for AL, and that's why we even
No. AL was South Beach. You're thinking we met Cypher Sounds at the shows out in the swamp.
So the South Beach show was the NFA.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So let me explain. So basically, at that time, I would, the internet was still just kind of starting to pop. So I could go online and find upcoming shows just through the internet. And I'd be like, oh, so-and-so is going to play here in Miami. And I would just cold call a promoter and just harass them and go, hey, look, we're a local group. We want to open up. We don't want any money. Here's our music. Just give us an opportunity. And, man, through that, we were able to open for Mobb Deep, Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, Beat Nuts, and I remember that Beat Nuts show in South Beach. I remember that one clearly because to play South Beach at the time was kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, it still is a big deal, but South Beach was just kind of coming around.
We stayed at the Kent Hotel.
That's right.
And we were looking for a Bible.
Yes.
And you called the front desk and said, hey, man, you guys got any Bibles? Why, you need rolling papers? Remember that? I remember that.
Yeah, I forgot. You're right.
I was like, really?
I forgot my Bible, and I said, "Hey, do you have a Gideon's Bible?" And the guy goes, "No, we don't stock the Bibles anymore. People cut them up and smoke the paper." That was a trip, dude. To think, I brought you all the way over to crazy South Beach.
Yep.
In the middle of that. I remember that was just such a weird.
That was a wild, but I remember.
That was a wild night. But we wound up at Khaled's radio station. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do.
So for those, everybody knows DJ Khaled now, but at the time, Khaled was a radio. Yeah, he was an underground. He had an underground pirate radio station, and to promote the show that night at the club, he had all the openers go over and rhyme at Khaled's pirate radio station, which to me it was just a radio station.
Yeah.
I'll never forget this because we were rhyming on the air with this guy by the name of AL who never really blew up, but
he was on an Echo mixtape.
Yeah, he was.
Lyricist Lounge.
Yeah,
really well respected in the underground.
Yeah, and I remember he leans over to me and he goes, "Yo, you're white. You should check out my boy Eminem." Yeah. And I'm like, immediately I go into white boy hater mode. I'm like, whatever, dude. Just because I'm a white guy, I gotta like the other white rappers, you're white, you'll get along with this guy, and I'm thinking in my head whatever. And so I remember he quoted one of Eminem's lines, and this is pre Dr. Dre. This is when he's Slim Shady EP before he got his deal, and he quoted the line. He said, "I fell asleep with a beer and woke up with a kegger." Do you remember that?
No, he said something like, "I fell asleep with a beer, woke up with a keg, something about a peg leg." And he's rapping. I'm like, okay, I don't.
I was I remember in my head going, well, that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
I was like, that guy's never going to go anywhere.
But then the one line he quoted us was when he said, you couldn't make the crowd throw up their hands and they swallowed.
See, I don't remember him saying, if they couldn't, I didn't remember that. I just remember thinking well, a white guy from Detroit's not going to go anywhere. Yeah. That's for sure.
I remember driving home Eminem, what kind of name is that?
Right, we were Eminem.
I'm going to call myself Skittles. Remember
right,
that?
it's just
joking, yeah.
So we were supposed to open up for Beat Nuts, who at the time had a big hit with Watch Out Now. And they, for some reason, they
became a Jennifer Lopez song.
Right. But they never, for some reason, they never showed up. Do you remember this?
Yeah, they didn't show.
And again, I'm like, what is the deal with these mainstream shows? Like, how do these guys operate? Like, so I remember we got up there, we rocked like a 2 songs or something like that, and I was thinking in my head, like, we just need to cut it short because people were just there to grind on each other and make some money.
Yep.
And I was kind of disappointed, and I think I said something on stage like, you know, we're not here to preach at nobody, but we're just here to let you know God loves you or something like that. And I remember some guy kind of pulling me aside like, yo, man, thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
You know, and I thought, this night was just a terrible waste of time. and then we looked over, and then I remember you walked over to some guy in the club.
Well, he called me over.
Right.
He was in the VIP section.
Right.
He was the only one in the VIP section.
Right.
And he called me over, and I came back. He was like, yo, you know who that is? It was Chino XL.
And for those that don't know who Chino XL, like, he was very much like a super respected, punchline, heavy rap guy.
He was Eminem before Eminem.
Right. And, you know, at the time he had beef with Tupac, and, like, you know, he was definitely, like, I couldn't believe he was just sitting there in the club, like, 10 feet from us.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I go, what did he say to you? Do you remember that?
I remember exactly.
Okay, what did he say? What did he say?
And it's weird. He goes, hey, man, he goes, y'all are really dope. He goes, and don't let anything ever break up your crew, man. Stay as a crew. I remember that. Like, he's like, y'all do your thing. It was dope.
And then within a year, the group was
Yeah, which
was
is
over with.
The prophet Chino XL, right?
So again, it was an interesting time because, so, like, you know, to try and represent in those circles, it's a tough thing, and I realize, like, it's hard because people go to clubs to get drunk and to hook up, and so it's hard to be. So I thought maybe our quote unquote ministry should be to those that are behind the scenes. And I remember the promoter himself was like, "Yo, I went to a Christian school growing up, and, like, you know, thank you for your music," or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought, you know, all the time we're still sitting there, you know, we're doing church shows, but little by little these other doors are opening up.
Well, do you remember what was the weird? I don't remember the promoter's name, but one thing that stuck out to me. Do you remember how, out of all the opening acts, he invited us to his house before the show?
Well, there was,
and his wife actually cooked us dinner, and
yes,
we ate there. And
right.
It was
I remember.
Really, it reminded me more of like doing a church show. It was really
right.
odd.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
Remember
Absolutely,
that?
I
Yeah.
totally remember. I remember he had a super dope crib.
Yeah.
And he wanted us to wear the shirts on
Yeah,
stage.
and we did.
No, we didn't.
We didn't?
No, because his company was called No Effing Around, NFA.
Oh.
And I was like, yo, man, appreciate the shirt. I think it'd just be kind of weird if we wore that on stage.
Yeah, that's Christian. I do remember that. But I wore that junk when I got home.
Yeah, exactly.
No fooling around, bro.
Yeah, no fool. Yeah, because if you just saw the logo, you wouldn't be like, oh, okay, I know what you're saying. But anyway, point is, so, which leads me to probably one of the most, I don't want to say, for me, it was a philosophical change when this show happened, because up to that point, and it's funny with the whole Christian rappers who's a Christian thing, which is such a hot topic now. I remember at the time, we were kind of wrestling with what that meant, because we would constantly be asked, like, who are you? What do you do? How do you define yourself? And I think we were on some, like, we're just, you know, we're rappers who are Christians or whatever, you know what I mean? And we had this sort of philosophy was like, get their respect first with skills, and then you share your life with them.
Yeah.
That was our philosophy, which leads me to the show that for me was a turning point, which was when we opened up for Tribe Called Quest. Mm-hmm. And I'm probably going to end this with this one.
That should be its own podcast, because that's a great one.
But so I come and find that Tribe Called Quest is coming to Orlando, and in my head I was like, yo, this is a huge deal, because one, I was a huge Tribe fan, but they were also coming off of Low End Theory and Midnight Marauders, and they had just put out Beats, Rhymes, and Life.
Yep. And
so this was like one of their first shows on the Beats, Rhymes, and Life tour. And I remember reaching out to the club. It was called the Embassy. And the guy was like, yeah, you can open up. You'll be one of 4 opening acts. And I remember him saying, like, you know, Tribe won't play till later. And I remember, wasn't DJ Shadow on the event too?
Yeah.
That was before he really blew up too.
Blew up, yep.
So we get there, and we're backstage chilling or whatever. And this thing was, in hindsight, now that I had the experience to know, but I should have known that this thing was going to implode before it even happened. So the promoter says, okay, this is the way it's got to go. He goes, you guys perform for 30 minutes, then there's a 30-minute break. Then the next act performs for 30 minutes, and there's a 30-minute break. So he kept staggering all the acts.
That's horrible.
Which is terrible.
Yeah.
One, anybody that comes to see a headliner just doesn't want to sit through 4 opening acts that they don't know. Much less, they didn't. This is one of the weird shows where they opened up at 7 and everybody was there at 7. Come to find out, Tribe wasn't going on until midnight, but they didn't tell the crowd this at all. So this crowd's getting more and more antsy, and instead of them staggering the groups, everybody went back to back to back to back, and we were the last ones to go of all the openers.
Really? Yeah.
And I remember the promoter coming back, and he was freaking out,
And that's summer?
he's cussing out all the opening acts, and he goes, "You sons of intellect," he's talking about us, because y'all ain't going on for an hour. So the crowd just sits there for an hour straight. No one's telling them what's going on. No one's saying, "Hey guys, Tribe will be up at midnight." It's just that, and I remember the guy that went right before us, got a really bad reception. Remember him?
Yep.
He had yodeling in his rap songs or something like that. The crowd was not feeling it. Didn't he throw flyers out in the crowd and they threw them back at him?
Yep. God, this show was horrible.
But we used to do this thing in our set where, in my opinion, it was super creative. It's we would pretend to bring out fake turntables, just pantomiming it. There was no actual turntables, and so we would act like we were plugging it in and spinning and DJing while Jack would do the beatbox, and I would pretend like I was cutting it up. So it was I thought it was really creative.
Yeah, it was dope.
And then we would rhyme over each other's beatboxes. So we had that in the set, with the 2 opening songs, that, and then another song. And I'll never forget my man Jeff Adams, who was there hanging out backstage with us, who was a goofball to begin with. Remember when he told the guys they couldn't wear hats on stage?
Yeah. Because everyone thought he was security because how tall he was. You can't wear it out there.
He came and hung out with us, and this opening group was called the Warheads, and the guy would do, and they were really dope, but they were super scary, and they wouldn't talk to nobody, and they looked like they would just attack you, and they both were solid 250 pounds, and the guy would do this war cry on stage. It's the weirdest thing I'd ever heard, but it actually worked. But anyway, right before they go on, Jeff is standing at the side of the stage, and he goes, "Hey guys, you can't wear hats on stage. We have a no hat policy." And the guy takes his hat off. He's like, "Oh man!"
Yeah, I remember that. Oh.
And that's when I thought, these dudes ain't as hard as they're trying to come off. Anyway, so I'll never forget. Jeff goes, "Don't do that beatbox on stage." He said that clearly. Yeah. He's like, "Don't do that. It's not going to work." I'm like, "Man, you don't know what you're talking about. This thing kills everywhere we go." It's the first 2 songs, they kind of put up with us.
Well, what you don't remember,
what?
and I
Tell me.
remember this very vividly because it was very upsetting to us. We didn't do any of our songs because for some reason their DAT machine wasn't working. So you had a cassette tape with some old beats, and we just formatted our new songs to the old beats. I remember that because
I don't remember that.
We had to go to the car and practice how we were going to do it to fit the beats that you had on tape. So we were rapping to 5-year-old beats, not even the stuff that we had recorded to. So we were already kind of off put by that. Do you remember that?
I do remember having to switch, but I don't think they were my old King J Mac beats.
Yes.
So it wasn't the new stuff. You're right. But I think up to that point, our shows have been going so well.
Yes.
In my head, I think I got gassed. Oh, this will kill. It.
Yeah.
And they kind of everything was. We were just set up to fail. So again, the crowd sits there for an hour. Then the DJ starts just hyping up the crowd.
Y'all ready for Tribe?
He's like, y'all ready for Tribe? And the crowd's like, yeah. And then he goes, okay, here's Sons of Intellect. Out comes these 2 white dudes talking about Jesus on stage and rapping over whatever. I don't even think the beats were the issue. I think it was just a combination of everything. And I just remember looking out in the crowd, and the first song ended, nobody clapped. It was dead silence. And I was like, well, this isn't going the way I planned. Next song, we did the second song, and the crowd was just not responding. And I remember do you remember it was predominantly Puerto Rican, right? I remember the crowd was real heavy Boricua. And we went into the beatbox part, and I thought, well, this will win them over, right? Because this is real hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
And just like within 30 seconds of it, just this crowd, this pocket of boos start happening. And then I just remembered the whole crowd turned.
Yep.
And everything that had been, like the guy that had put the stuff in the audience, he had thrown the flyers into the audience. All that stuff started flying at us.
Yep.
And I'm like, I just remember I never seen so much anger on people's faces. I'm like,
Well, because they wanted to see Tribe Called Quest.
but I'm like, I just remember looking in the crowd and just seeing pure hatred on this crowd's face. Like, we will kill you. And it was just such a cathartic moment because I don't think at any time in my life I had ever been booed. Much less like that, where like you got 1,000 people telling you that you're the worst thing on the planet. And I remember going, all right, well, you got to, like, I remember thinking in my head, like, let's just cut our losses and let's just get off the stage, right?
Yeah.
And I remember starting to walk off the stage, and I got halfway to the exit, and I'm looking around, and there's Golden Child still standing on the stage, screaming back at the crowd.
Yep.
You were yelling at the, what did you say, something like, this is real hip hop?
Who wants to battle? This is real hip hop. Come up here and battle me. I'll battle you right now.
And I just remember, like, up to that point, they were booing. At that point, they were ready to kill you.
Yeah,
I remember hands being extended out of the crowd, like, visibly trying to squeeze your neck.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, oh gosh, this is not what this just got really bad. And I think, didn't I come and just like grab you?
You grabbed me. You actually picked me up. And then finally, like, not that I was mad, but you were picking me up, and I was like, all right, man, I'll walk off. You're like, yeah, we don't need to be doing this. So we walked off. It was just I was caught up in the moment because I think we both knew and saw what happened. It wasn't really us. It was the situation.
Right. But it was like we were the whipping boys. Because nobody else had really gotten booed at that point. But we were like the culmination of the crowd's frustration. I mean, combined with the fact that, again, you know, it's not easy doing what we did. Like, we were the antithesis of everything that was going on in the industry. So it was like all that combined together. But, you know, to his credit, Jeff was right. We shouldn't have done that beatbox. You know, and I don't know why he saw that when we didn't.
How he knew that.
Maybe just because he was from Orlando, or just he knew the crowd, or maybe he saw what was happening. I don't know. But I remember that was probably the lowest I think I'd ever felt, you know.
Yeah, that was not a fun car ride home.
But I remember just literally, we came off the stage, and didn't you tell me Consequence was there?
Yeah, Consequence was there, yep.
So, which is Q-Tip's cousin. Mm-hmm. I don't know why I remember him in blue sweatpants, but he had blue sweatpants.
And a white shirt and a blue hat.
And what did he tell you? He said something to you.
I don't remember. I remember that Q-Tip asked me for chicken.
No, that was at the
other thing.
The other thing. You told me Consequence said, "Don't worry about it. You guys are dope."
Yeah, don't worry about it. It happened to us before too.
Right, but it didn't really like fix the sting because I thought this crowd is really hostile.
Yeah.
Like we could potentially get jumped. You know what I mean?
And I
like,
think the worst part about it is because we really wanted to stay and check out Tribe. But
right.
We couldn't even go into the crowd now.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I remember it's like we need to just go.
Yep.
And I remember we walked into the. I just remember the only thing I remember this really clearly is we walked in the parking lot. I said goodbye to Jeff. And some random girl comes up to me in the parking lot. She goes, "You guys are Christians, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "You just made my night." She goes, "I don't even have to see Tribe now." Do you remember this?
No.
I remember this so clearly. It was the only thing that gave me a little bit of strength to make it home. And in my head, I was like, you know what, dude? We're never going to be accepted. Like, we'll never be accepted.
I remember you saying that to me when we got in the car.
I was like, no matter what we do, no matter how good we are or are not, I was like, we are always going to be judged on the color of our skin and the fact that what our faith is. And I remember just being like, forget it. Like, it's just not going to happen. Because I remember somebody told me, they gave me like, they go, "Man, I've been praying for you, and I feel like God is telling you to cast your net on the other side." And I took that as saying, it's time for you to try and do some mainstream stuff. So I kept going, why is this happening? You know?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, well, I'm done. You know? And it was funny because literally, I think I called ambassador, maybe. I called somebody, or maybe I didn't even call anybody. But within a week, I got a phone call, and someone goes, "Hey, we're bringing in Mobb Deep to Ybor City. Do you want to open up?" And I'm like, I was so shook. I was like,
Shook ones. I'm just kidding.
yeah, exactly. I was really shook because I thought in my head, I'm like, what if we go to Ybor City and we just get booed again?
Yeah.
And I remember making a very conscious decision going, you know what, from here on out, we've got to be Jesus first out of our mouth.
Yeah.
Do you remember me saying something like that? I was like, we have to be, the first thing we say on that stage has
That
to
was when
be,
it went from the argument of we're rappers who are Christians to like we're Christians who rap. It was a,
Right.
it was a conscious decision.
I said, you know what, from here on out, I'm sick of getting booed and almost beat up just for being white. I was like, I'd rather get booed and get beat up for being a believer. And the funny thing was, that was the first thing we said at the Mobb Deep show.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And nothing happened.
Yep.
Nothing happened. I mean, it's not like we were a super huge slam dunk, but we never had the problems again. Never one time again did we ever get booed or did we get... And I realized, like, at that point, or maybe somebody told me, they were like, you've been trying to do this in your own ability.
At that point, we were no longer relying on hip-hop. We were relying on God. We weren't relying
Like,
on
the philosophy of
Yeah.
have skill first and then that will open up the doors. It was like, nope. Put Christ first and let the chips fall where they may. So anyway, we're gonna stop right
Crazy,
there.
though, you know who was at that Mobb Deep show
Who?
and was not a believer?
Who?
Giovanni. The guy
Really?
I interacted with, yep. And he remembered.
No, you're thinking of the one he was at out in Immokalee, not that one.
Okay,
This
yeah.
is the Tampa
Okay,
one.
you're right. We did it twice. My bad. Man, usually my memory is good. What the heck? It's probably cutting hair.
Yeah, they all wore gold and black.
Anyway, but no, so that's what Jack is talking. He mentions that eventually we did do another show with Mobb Deep, and one of the guys that became his rhyme partner years later was in the crowd
As not a believer.
as not a believer. So it's funny how things go forward. So I'm gonna stop right here. I think we're gonna have to do a part 3, bro.
All right, man.
Later. All right, what's up, y'all? I wanted to jump on the line with a homie by the name of Jeff Adams, who was at that infamous Tribe Called Quest show, and I thought it'd be interesting to, one, get his perspective, because you, sir, were like a voice of prophecy of what was gonna happen. But you were also sort of a detached third party that was kind of hanging out at the whole show. And for those that don't know who Jeff Adams is, this is probably, out of all the industry people I know, the one guy that I go as far back as the beginning of my career. He was in a rap group back in the day called DDC, which were one of the first groups ever signed to, infamous Grape Tree Records. He was also one of the only handful of Florida rappers in the state, and one of the first guys I ever connected with. This goes all the way back to my King J Mac days. And, flash forward, he was super involved in the industry, was very, very, very much the guy who helped Group 1 Crew get out there amongst a ton of other people. Your resume is too long for me to list, sir, but I just want people to at least know your pedigree.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that intro.
Oh, well, hey, I'm just trying to make, just trying to show respect where respect is due. So, without any further talk on my end, describe, that night and why you were there, or how you wound up there, or what you remember from that night. Go for it.
I remember it was a dark, rainy, stormy night. And I just remember that just something wasn't right in the air.
Yeah.
And so KJ called me and says, hey, we're opening up for Tribe Called Quest. I said, well, I'll come on out. So I got in my car, I drove to the venue, knowing something just wasn't right in the air.
Are you being sarcastic, or are you for real? Because you're not Yoda, okay? You don't have the force powers. Maybe you do. Maybe
I'm trying to make entertainment with the story.
Oh,
they're trying to
got it. Okay, cool.
Suck your listeners
if there was
in
something,
there.
well, it's funny, man. I found my old planner, and I had written in the day that show was. I was looking through stuff literally last night, and I found my planner. Turns out it was on Palm Sunday.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if there's any sort of foreshadowing about that, but yeah, it was Palm Sunday. was the day of that show. And anyway, go ahead.
I guess I would explain the palms thrown on stage.
If they would have had palms, they would have chucked it at us. That's for sure.
So, anyways, I went to the venue and it was hanging backstage, but there was like, man, I mean, I guess back in the days, those guys would just like stack the openers. You know, I mean, the show started like at 7:00. And you guys were opening right before Tribe. So at that point, everybody's showing up at 7:00 thinking Tribe's going to be on stage.
Right.
And you know, you say you had to go through all these openers. And I remember one story that sticks out the most because I was just standing backstage. Because that club actually became a Christian nightclub after that.
I know, yeah. We got to talk about that. We got to talk about that because there's an amazing story of what happens later, 10 years later. But go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm standing back there, and I'm messing. Of course, you know me, I'm a clown, so I have to mess with everybody. And I just remember there was this hard guy. I guess they worked with Shaquille O'Neal. I can't remember their names.
Warheads.
The Warheads, yeah. So one of the guys, they were acting all hard, you know, swagging to get up on stage. I was just standing there, and I guess he thought I worked at the club or something. I said, "Sir, we have a no hat policy in the club." and the guy swagging goes, "Oh," and he takes his hat off real quick. And I'm just kidding. He goes, "Oh, dog," and he puts it back on and hits the stage, and does some like Indian war chant. Goes, "Yeah!" I'm like, "What in the world is this?" So at that point, I kind of know the crowd was getting restless. I mean, this was probably, 11:00 at night. And so anyways, Golden Solid, KJ were all pumped about this performance. And so, I was, from doing rap shows or whatever, and I go, Golden Child was all over my face. Check this out, dude. We're going to do this beatbox thing. Check this out. I was like, and they started doing it, and I just kind of looked at it, and I'm like, wait a minute. I don't think you should do this. I mean, that crowd's kind of restless out there. I mean, they're ready for Tribe. I said, just get to what you need to get to and just hit it, and just don't really talk. Just do what you do and get off that stage. They go, no, man, this beatbox is hot. Yeah, so I go, all right, so I'm standing there and I'm watching it from perspective. And I knew something, it's just like, you just have this vibe in the air like, oh, my gosh, this is not going to go off too well. And because I saw the crowd's reaction to what was going on. And I guess, too, it's like when you have a whole night of stuff and you represent Jesus at that point. I mean, it's just like kind of going to, going to Gatorland and jumping into the lake of gators. So the fact that you mentioned Jesus and did the beatbox and they're restless wasn't a good combo. And I just saw the faces, and I just remember I guess it was just a rookie mistake. I mean, but you can't go wrong with Jesus' name. People are scared to say Jesus' name these days. But, KJ didn't. So when the crowd, they started getting restless, they started throwing cups at the stage, and they got done with the beatbox, and all I remember is KJ goes, Jesus is Lord, and then, runs off the stage. And,
I said that?
Yes.
I see that. I don't remember saying that. Wow, that's funny that, that was such a blur, dude. When that happened, you hear stories about people getting booed. It's not until you finally it's like hearing about a shark attack, and then all of a sudden you're in a shark attack,
Yes, it's almost like when you get booed, it's almost like the feeling of you're in an accident, and it happens.
Yeah.
It's like in slow motion, but it's just like so traumatic at the same time. You're like, what is going on here? Well,
Yes. You're absolutely right. So you were what stage? You were right at the stage entrance, right?
Yeah, it was weird. I mean, there's a stage, there was a back entrance to the stage where the green room was, I guess, right. And then you walk up these stairs, and then you walk on the stage behind the main stage there. It was kind of a weird setup, but yeah, it was like a door. It was like this little door.
Right.
I was standing there the whole night, and I was watching the whole thing from the back of the stage, and I was like, wow, okay, this crowd is restless, And I think even they were pretty pissed at Tribe too there for a while because they took so long. Because I remember
really?
I went to a show there. Yeah, I went to a show there too. I guess it was the promoter there because I went to I think it was House of Pain's last show they did in Orlando. They didn't know it was, but Limp Bizkit opened up, and he put all these openers, and House of Pain didn't hit the stage till 12:30 at night, and only played for 35 minutes. And I think people were getting ticked because they wanted their value. They go, I don't know anything about these opening bands. So,
yeah. Man, I didn't know I shouted Jesus is Lord.
Yeah.
I didn't know I shouted that on the way out. I guess I was in such probably trauma that
I'm Paul. Jesus is Lord.
No, I don't. Thank you. So one thing when we were talking about this, trying to recollect it, was I couldn't. I'm in hindsight. I'm just trying again. In hindsight, how you saw what was going to happen before we did.
Yeah. Also, I'm impressed that you do a podcast and you multitask. You get coffee, you go, no thank you. You go through drive-throughs and stuff. That's pretty impressive.
Multitask, bro. I bring the listener everywhere. Anywhere I'm going, you're coming with me. But how? I mean, I you know what? But I'm saying, dude, how did you see that particular thing was gonna bomb like that? Because in our heads, we were like, tribe equals real hip hop. You know what I'm saying? So do the things that represent real hip hop, i.e., beatboxing and creativity and scratching and stuff like that. How did you know that out of all the things was not going to work?
Well, I think it was just a weird time in hip hop in general. I mean, but I've always there's two parts of that. I've always been a very discerning person. I don't know what it is. Like when the Group One crew would do shows, and I would just say, "Hey, man, you might want to reel this in a little bit," because I felt like discerning. Like I could feel the crowd. Like, okay, this crowd is just not ready for this. And doing these, you've done this for a very long time, and like the opposition you come into, like going to a church, like back in the day when. I mean, I get in fights with, almost fights with people, like take your hat off in the church and you're standing on holy ground and, take your earrings out. And I dealt with all that stuff. So from a Christian perspective, I just always was kind of had discernment about certain situations. Like, okay, guys, we better, they're just very religious here. They're not sure about this. This is what we got to do. But even from a mainstream perspective, I always felt that. But,
do you think?
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, do you think our color, being the only white guys on that stage, combined with, our faith, do you think that worked against us? Or was it just, am I taking a martyr complex here? Or was it just a combination of that plus the night was just what led up?
It was a weird time. And I mean, that was just a weird time in hip hop for being a white MC because you had, the Vanilla Ice thing that was, third base. Was beating Vanilla Ice to a pulp a little bit, because a few years after that. But at that time, like alternative music was coming in, like the Beastie Boys, like left. It's kind of like they left hip hop and they went alternative, which, and then so to be a white MC, I mean, even House of Pain, they were the only ones still to legitimately do it, and he had to feel like he had to go like this whole black urban thing to what he was doing, because there was a respecting. It was like white MCs lost the respect because the white MCs tore each other down in the industry. And so there's really no respect there anymore. And then you add the Jesus thing. It just was, because, from a perspective, you go, oh, another white rapper again, because, the industry, from the mainstream perspective, really commercialized white rappers. And then I think people got sick of it. Like, oh, another white rapper, great. And so the regular rap industry was like, dude, these guys are busters, And so as you look at it, that was, that's what people's perspectives, were. You weren't legit if you were a white MC, and that sucked because you guys were dope. I mean, you guys could hold your own, and but the fact that you guys were into Jesus too didn't help matters either,
Right. Well, it's funny too because I remember here's two things I remember. One, to play to an all-black crowd for us was always the ultimate challenge because of everything you just said. But we sort of seem to find a degree of acceptance amongst Puerto Ricans and Hispanics. And so I always kind of like, I hate to say it, but I would like cut my hair into a fade and grow a goatee and try to be tan because I could pass as Puerto Rican or Cuban a lot easier than people being white. And I remember that crowd was predominantly Puerto Rican. And I just remember thinking, dang, even the Puerto Ricans hate us. Like, that's when I was like, it was such a rock bottom point for me because I thought, well, at least we'll be accepted by Hispanics. And sure enough, Orlando was like, we hate you. And I remember do you remember the group, one of the guys that opened up before us, he had his album was called Cow Wars and had a cow with a gun.
on the front cover.
Yeah,
Do you remember this guy?
I remember him. Yeah.
He went on right before us, and he was a black guy with dreads, but he rapped and he had yodeling in his chorus, and I thought, this is the most oddest person I've ever met from a rap perspective. And they kind of let him. They didn't boo him off the stage. I mean, I remember he wasn't like celebrated, but they just kind of put up with him. And
well,
tell me. Go ahead.
Well, that's thing. I know it's all flashback now. I know that's the thing. This was maybe the promoter set you guys up wrong, because I think after going through that guy, because I remember that guy's song. He had a song that goes, "Circle, circle, dot, dot. Now you get your cootie shot." I think at that point, the guy's like, okay, enough of this. Oh, now we got white guys talking about Jesus? Ah!
But didn't you tell me you heard him on the radio like a couple months later just bashing us for getting booed?
Yeah.
I remember you saying this to me like a year later. You're like, dude, that guy was just like going in on y'all on the radio.
Yeah, I mean, because I think he was like in the scene. Drew Garabo was in Orlando. He was a talk radio show, but he'd always like support local acts. I started DJing for the Nature Kids, this mainstream like hip hop rock band, and he said something one time. He's like, yeah, these white MCs, I held mine down. These white MCs got booed off the stage, yada yada yada. He was talking about on Drew's show, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I was there.
So you stuck
around
for Tribe though. I remember we left. We I think either because one, I think probably it was a Sunday night, so I had to get back to working at the church, and I'm sure Golden Child had to get back to school. So I know we drove home that night, but we certainly probably just left because I felt like the crowd was getting so dangerous that like we could potentially catch some physical violence. And I remember feeling like, well, I certainly can't go back into the crowd and watch Tribe. And it's a 3.5 hour drive home. So I remember we just got in the car like super depressed. Do you remember that? Like I was like, hey man, we're just going to go ahead and go.
Yeah, we've all had that feeling being performers for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like when it's like you put your heart and soul into something, it just doesn't go off and received very well. I mean, I think what pastors feel too. I mean, they've been praying and normally, and that's the beauty of being a pastor. If you're really hearing from the Lord, then, people are going to receive it. But if it's just a pastor-fed message, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, that was depressing. Yeah. No one received anything. There's no life. But, yeah, I understand that. I mean, I've been there many, many a times and really felt bad for artists that I've worked with from the management perspective. I feel like complete garbage. Like, man, what happened,
Right. Well, I think the great thing about this whole story is there actually is a rainbow after the storm, is that venue became a Christian club.
Yeah.
A couple years later. So the venue was called the Embassy, which was pretty infamous for bringing through hip hop. But flash forward just really a couple years for me, I get my first record deal. I'm touring, and then probably around 02, 03, 04, things really start taking off for me. And I remember getting a show offer in Orlando, and it said Last Wave Club. And I thought, Last Wave Club? Like, what is this place? And I don't know if I either hit you up or I hit somebody up, was like, yo, what's the deal with the spot? And you were actually working at the Last Wave, correct, at that point?
Yeah, I mean, that was a really I had one of these dark ages in my walk. I was playing a mainstream band, and it kind of so much like happened in that time. So it was kind of like it was like my comeback, to Christ. I started working with this place called House of Hope, which they launched the Last Wave, and the crazy thing about it was just it was a very new concept from a very religious organization that didn't really understand what they were getting into. Because people had been shot in that club and killed. I think it was like 3 murders in that club.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Prior to that, yeah. So it was just like a real rough part of town. And actually, when I started working there, I lived down the street. I was probably like 5-10 minutes from there, but it was really different. But I think that area and just Orlando, and this, when you do like a lot of Christian stuff, I mean, besides Night of Joy and Rock Universe, they keep everybody out of Orlando. It's just a really strange market to tour in,
Right.
And even from a mainstream perspective, it's just weird. A lot of acts, if you don't go to House of Blues or Hard Rock Live, I mean, you just doing these smaller venues, like these indie bands. I mean, they pull out and have 400 people, like downtown Orlando or whatever. But it's just a weird, strange market. But the Christian club, same principle. I mean, it was just really tough to get off the ground, and it was a beautiful venue and all that great stuff. But it just never really flew.
Right.
But yeah, Pastor Frank eventually took over. I remember I was working there. I was helping book the bands and stuff and helping out, because I started working for like Jeff Hansen Creek Management Company and working with those guys and doing all that. But I was working there too, and I just remember the funny story with that is just like that place just has really strange memories for me, because there's a lady working there, and I don't know, just, you know, you ever been in those positions where someone wasn't right in a club, you know what I mean, and they shouldn't be there, but this lady was working there, and she just was so hard and very difficult to work with, and we got in it to one time, and I started crying, because I'm a real emotional guy. I started crying because I was so, like, fed up with all the junk, you know, and then what was funny was, if you know Pastor Frank, and I know you do, he pulled me aside and he goes, "Hey, bro, did you cry in there?" Like, he's making me feel bad. I was like, "Yeah, man." I go, I can't deal with this stuff anymore. This is too stressful. Because when you're trying to do ministry, and I was always looking out for bands and stuff, and I wasn't getting what I needed for the bands to make them feel welcome. It was frustrating. So he goes, "Did you cry in there?" And I was like, "Yeah, man." He goes, "Don't feel bad, bro. I cried too."
Well, were you working there when I got booked? Because I know I played there at least a couple times. I remember probably the biggest show I ever did in Florida was there from a hard ticket. Were you still working there when I played there?
I don't know. I can't remember. I remember you came in one time. Maybe I was there, because I left shortly after. Pastor Frank took over, and I stayed there a little while, and then I left the that side of things altogether, and I was, you know, pretty much like Jeff Hansen doing management stuff outside of there. But yeah, I mean, they had some good shows there, man.
Well, the irony again of all this is that, you know, it comes under a new name, it becomes a new venue, and I don't put two and two together. So I'm just thinking, hey, you're playing this Christian club venue in Orlando, and my experience with Christian clubs is that they never really lasted. They were always great ideas, but then within like a month or 2 months or a year, they were all out of business. But I remember playing there at one particular show. It was like the one time I opened up, or the one time I headlined, and someone said to me, like, "You know, this used to be the Embassy." And I kind of looked around, and I'm like, wait a second, this is a place where I got thrown off the stage. Like, you know, It would have been probably 6-7 years prior, but all of a sudden it came rushing back, and the stage just felt infinitely different to me. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That time, and I stood there, and I remember going, wow. Like, who would think that within that span of time that I got thrown off the stage that I would be back, not only headline, you know, pack the venue out and be able to, you know, to essentially proclaim the gospel in the same place where I was thrown off the stage. And I just was like, look at you, God. Look at how you bring things full circle. And I just was like humbled by that moment. I think I remember I got kind of emotional on stage, like, you know, because on one hand, it's like a PTSD.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you're like, man, God is such a redeemer. Like, he takes the worst of the worst situations, and, you know, if you're willing to hang on. It's funny that you mentioned I said Jesus is Lord. I don't remember saying that, but I guess I'm assuming I did. And it's true, you know. So, a couple things I've realized through the whole situation is, one, never do a beatbox when you open up a Tribe Called Quest. 2, if a man tells you to take your hat off, take your hat off.
Always.
And never put yodeling in your rap songs.
Never. And never say circle, circle, dot, dot. Now I got my cootie shot. That's your hook.
I do. Well, thank you, man. Appreciate it, bro. Have a great day. Thanks for hopping on.
Man. All right.
Later.
Bye.
Escape judgment, you shall not What you gonna do when your heartbeat stop? I warned you with this. Now where you at when you cease to exist, son? Cease to exist. Escape judgment. You shall not. What you gonna do when your heartbeat stop? I warned you with this. Now where you at when you cease to exist, son? Cease to exist.
Yo, a time be running through this hourglass so fast. Fools be all about the cash, but will they outlast the weeping and the gnashing of teeth? There's no relief. You thought your life was complete, but in the end you faced defeat. Cause hell became your reality. Judgment souls became casualties, their mentalities. My space is in the heavenlies, my soul's in Yahweh's hands. I took these blinders off my eyes so I can understand. A foolish one disregard God's plan, while fallen angels take command. Heavenly battles begin while souls lost in grips of sin. I'm waging wars against these false doctrines and false religions and false beliefs. Cause he became strong when I became weak. That's why your freaking beats to stay complete. Stay behind my master's feet. I find these origins and lands in concrete. My eyes survey the street. So many lost lives of brokenness. Lost in the worlds of the loneliness. God has chosen this time to fill the phone